Ever imagined yourself like uh, behind the controls of a massive cargo plane
Oh, yeah?
on approach to a runway that's squeezed between mountain peaks?
Right.
All while the air is so thin, it
Yeah.
feels like you're practically flying on a wing and a prayer.
Oh, yeah. Like a...
Today, we're
Oh,
doing exactly that as we deep dive into the world of high-altitude landings.
it's a challenge. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about your average airport here.
Right.
We're headed to Quito, Ecuador, a location that makes even seasoned pilots double-check their calculations.
No kidding. To guide us through this aeronautical adventure, we're turning to a flight simulation by Chewy94.
Okay.
He's an experienced simmer who's recreated a real Lufthansa cargo flight from 2014, even inputting the airline's actual settings. Now, I know you might be thinking it's just a simulation.
Right, true.
Yeah.
But the technology he's using is incredibly sophisticated, mimicking real-world conditions with remarkable accuracy.
All right.
This isn't some arcade game. It's a tool pilots themselves use for training.
So we're in good hands.
Oh, yeah.
And before we even get to Quito, there's another crucial detail that makes this particular deep dive so fascinating. The plane itself.
Okay.
Tell us about the MD-11
Yeah.
and what makes it such a handful, especially at high altitudes.
The MD-11 is a bit of a diva in the aviation world, powerful but demanding.
Okay.
One of its quirks is its high approach speed,
Okay.
meaning it needs a good amount of runway to touch down safely.
Right.
Now combine that with the thinner air you find at high altitudes, and things get even more interesting.
Okay, let's break down this whole thin air thing, because I think that's where things get really fascinating and a bit counterintuitive.
Right.
What's the science behind why thinner air is such a big deal for planes?
At higher altitudes, the air pressure is lower, meaning there are fewer air molecules packed into the same space.
Right.
For us on the ground, this might mean taking deeper breaths.
Right.
But for planes, it has a significant impact on their performance.
Sure.
You see, planes rely on lift generated by air flowing over their wings.
Right.
Thinner air equals less lift,
Okay.
making it trickier to stay aloft.
Yeah.
And it's not just about lift, when engine power is also affected, as there's less oxygen available for combustion.
So it's like trying to run a marathon on a mountaintop while breathing through a straw. Suddenly, landing this massive plane on a postage stamp-sized runway feels even more daunting.
Exactly. And this is where the expertise of the pilot truly comes into play.
Right.
They need to meticulously factor in these high-altitude challenges, adjusting their calculations and approach for both takeoff and landing.
And speaking of takeoff, that's where we find Chewy94 at the start of the simulation.
Sure.
He's in Lima, Peru, ready to whisk a virtual plane load of cargo up into the thin Andean air.
Right.
But before he even touches the throttle, he's meticulously inputting settings, including something called a cost index.
Okay.
What in the aviation world is a cost index, and why should we care? Think of it as the plane's version of, like, your car's fuel economy setting.
Yeah.
Airlines use cost indices to balance speed and fuel efficiency.
Right.
A lower cost index means a slower, more
Right.
fuel-efficient flight,
Yeah.
while a higher index prioritizes speed. And in Chewy94's simulation,
Right.
he's inputting a cost index of 30,
Wow.
the actual value Lufthansa cargo used for this route.
Interesting.
It's a fascinating detail, showing that even cargo flights aren't just about hauling goods. There's a delicate balance between cost and time.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes sense, especially for a long-haul flight like this.
Right.
Now, let's dive into the real nail-biter landing in Quito.
Right.
We've touched on the challenges of high altitudes and thin air,
Right.
but what makes this airport specifically so tricky?
Well, imagine a city nestled in a valley, surrounded by towering mountains on all sides.
Oh, wow.
It's Quito.
Wow.
The airport has a single runway,
Okay.
and both sides of it are practically hugging the mountains.
So you're basically trying to thread a needle with a giant airplane. And the needle is surrounded by mountains.
Pretty much.
Oh, my God.
This means pilots have very little room for air during their descent.
Right.
And as we talked about earlier, the thinner air at high altitude makes the MD-11 more sensitive to wind gusts,
Right.
making it even more challenging to control.
Remember how Chewy94 got tossed around like a leaf in a hurricane during his descent?
Yeah.
That's why pilots need to understand something called minimum safe altitude, or MSA.
Okay.
What's the deal with MSAs?
Think of an MSA as an invisible safety net woven between those Andean peaks.
Okay.
It's the lowest altitude a plane can safely fly over a particular area,
Okay.
ensuring it stays clear of any obstacles. It's a crucial tool for pilots navigating through mountainous terrain.
And in the simulation, you can see Chewy 94 nervously checking his terrain map as he gets closer to Quito.
Right.
Even in a virtual world, the tension is palpable.
Absolutely.
Now, imagine the pressure real pilots feel when they're actually responsible for the plane, the cargo, and their own safety.
I know, right?
So you're heading towards these mountains, knowing you need to stay above a certain altitude, dealing with thinner air and unpredictable winds. What's going through a pilot's mind at a moment like this?
It's a combination of intense focus and calculated decision-making.
Yeah.
Every adjustment is critical,
Right.
and they need to be ready to react in an instant.
Right.
It's a testament to the skill and experience of these pilots that they can handle this incredible pressure.
Okay, folks, we've got the lay of the land, the high altitude, the mountains, the winds, the thin air. This landing is going to be a nail-biter, no matter how experienced the pilot is.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of which, in part 3, we'll dive right into Chewy 94's landing attempt, analyzing the critical decisions he makes and the intense moments he encounters.
This is going to be good.
Stay tuned. We're back, and the tension is rising.
Yeah.
Chewy 94 is descending toward Quito, the mountains looming closer with each passing second.
Right.
So what's going through the mind of a pilot as they approach a landing like this?
Remember, this isn't just about following a checklist. It's about making critical decisions in a rapidly evolving environment. As Chewy 94 descends, he has a few options, each with its own set of challenges.
Okay.
He can opt for a steeper approach,
Right.
which puts more stress on the plane and demands more precise handling. Or he can choose a shorter final approach,
Right.
which leaves less time to react to any unexpected changes in wind conditions.
It's like trying to choose between two different roads, each with its own potholes and surprises.
Yeah.
And even though Chewy 94 is in a sim, he's actually debating the pros and cons of these choices aloud.
Exactly. And there's another critical element that makes this landing particularly tricky: the flap setting.
Okay.
This is where a pilot uses movable panels on the wings to increase lift at lower speeds, crucial for a safe landing. But with the thinner air, Chewy 94 needs even more lift than usual to control the MD-11's descent.
So it's a delicate balancing act, adjusting the flaps to find that sweet spot between slowing down enough to land safely and maintaining enough lift to prevent a stall.
Exactly. And remember, he's doing all of this in real time, constantly monitoring speed, altitude, and wind conditions, adjusting his approach as needed.
You know, we've talked about the technical challenges, but what about the emotional side of this landing?
Yeah.
How do you think a pilot feels in a situation like this?
It's a cocktail of pressure, focus, and adrenaline.
Right.
They know that every decision counts, that the mountains are just a few feet away, and that the wind could shift at any moment. But at the same time,
Yeah.
they have to remain calm, focused, and in complete control.
Okay, let's cut to the final moments of the video.
Okay.
We're at the point where even a seasoned pilot would be gripping the controls a little tighter.
The tension is palpable.
Right?
Chewy 94 is fighting against the gusty winds, battling the high ground speed, and then bam, a wind shear warning flashes on his screen.
Oh, wow.
Wind shear is a sudden change in wind direction and speed, and it can be extremely dangerous during landing. Imagine a miniature tornado suddenly appearing in front of you,
Oh my gosh.
only with no warning.
That's enough to make anyone break a sweat. But to his credit, Chewy 94 manages to adjust.
Right.
He wrestles that MD-11 onto the runway a bit hard, perhaps, but he gets it down.
Right.
And you can hear the audible sigh of relief in his voice.
Absolutely. You could practically feel the weight lifting off his shoulders.
Now, how did he do? Was it a good landing for those conditions?
Let's look at the data. A 546 feet per minute descent rate and 1.1 G-force.
Okay.
It was a firm landing, even for a seasoned pilot.
So you're telling me that even those seasoned professionals would be sweating a bit on this one?
Let's just say that Quito isn't exactly a relaxing vacation spot for pilots.
Right.
The thin air, the mountains, the winds, it all adds up to a challenging landing, even under the best of circumstances.
All right, listeners, I think we've all learned a thing or two about the dedication, skill, and pressure that pilots face, especially at challenging airports like Quito.
Right.
Next time you see a package delivered, take a moment to think about the journey it took, the decisions made, and the expertise required to get it there safely. It's a whole new perspective, isn't it?
It certainly is.
And remember, it's all about understanding the limits, adapting to the unexpected, and appreciating the delicate balance between risk and reward that pilots navigate every day.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those aha moments coming.